Following an unexpected turn of events, a group of fugitives find themselves in charge of a colossal starship with unfathomable power. In outer space, Kai, a Brunan G warrior from Brunis II, leads his army in their last battle against the forces of the Divine Order, a religious cult centered on his divine shadow. While flying in their insectoid fighters, Kai sings the Brunan G fight song, Yo Wei Yo, to inspire his squadron. As they approach his divine shadow, they confront the Foreshadow, a massive webbed structure with immense branches that release waves of destruction. The waves inflict heavy casualties on the Brunan G warriors and devastate Brunis II, destroying the planet. In his final act, Kai instructs his surviving comrade to join him in crashing into his Divine Shadow's pod, but the warrior is defeated by the waves, leaving Kai all alone. Soon, Kai crashes into his Divine Shadow's control pod, and the injured Brunan G warrior lies on the ground as his Divine Shadow approaches. Just before taking his final breath, Kai warns his enemy that the Brunan G will eventually destroy him, as foreseen by the Time Prophet. However, his Divine Shadow dismisses Kai's warning, claiming that the Time Prophet's vision is flawed. He then ends Kai's life by driving a sharp weapon into his chest. Within seconds, his Divine Shadow places his hand above the warrior's head and absorbs his memories, before sending the deceased body to the Bio-Scholars for preservation. 2008 years later, in the Cluster, the capital of the Divine Order and League of 20,000 Planets, Security Guard Class 4 Stanley Tweedle peacefully sleeps in his chamber. Suddenly, an announcer's voice reverberates through the centralized sound system, conveying appreciation to his Divine Shadow for protecting them from the Dark Zone. Following the announcement, an automated voice jolts the security guard awake for the third time, cautioning him that another missed wake-up call will result in 7 additional demerits, adding to his existing tally of 991 demerits. Although reluctant, Stan rises from bed and goes to his station. Meanwhile, prisoner transport 58K603 travels to the cluster, carrying a former unit of the Wife Bank, Zev Bellringer, and the notorious heretic Thodin from the Austral B pair. In his station, Stan entertains himself by throwing metallic rings at the robotic guard, shooting them into a rectangular hole at its feet. Suddenly, a line officer appears in the hologram, informing Stan that prisoner transport 58K603 is requesting a docking beam. Before allowing the vessel to enter, the guard asks for an authorization code. However, the officer admits to having forgotten it, prompting Stan to direct her to another gate. Eventually, the vessel is granted docking permission by another officer, while Stan is admonished and sent to the corrections center to receive his punishment for disregarding the line officer's direct order. Meanwhile, the Divine Clerics are in the process of sedating a restrained prisoner, whom they selected last minute for the transfer of his Divine Shadow into a new host body, a ritual that's performed when a Divine Shadow has reached the end of their life. Dressed in purple cloaks, the Russian clerics electrocute the new host's brain, but due to the lack of time, they skip a second vaccine. As a result, the new host's brain isn't fully cleansed. Without delay, they position the new host above the dying body of his Divine Shadow. Following the preparation, the clerics give the signal to his Divine Shadow to perform the transfer. His Divine Shadow opens his mouth and transfers his consciousness into the new body through the tube connected to the host's mouth. After the transfer is complete, a Divine Cleric proceeds to remove the brain from his Divine Shadow's former body. The extracted brain, containing his Divine Shadow's memories, is then placed on an electric module with a transparent cover. These preserved brains, known as Divine Predecessors, serve as a source of advice and guidance for the new Divine Shadow. With his new body, his Divine Shadow ascends to meet the Divine Predecessors, who inform him that the Lex, a biogenetically engineered vessel and weapon, will soon grow to destroy the opposing planets. Hearing this, his Divine Shadow inquires which planets are chosen for destruction, but when the Divine Predecessors respond that the selection is his task, his Divine Shadow declares that his task is complete, claiming that he chooses to destroy all planets. With such a revelation, the Divine Predecessors gasp in unison, unsupportive of the evil plan. Following this, his Divine Shadow justifies that his brain isn't fully cleansed, claiming that his partial human origin gives him the ability to choose his own path. He then declares that he'll command Lex on its voyage of destruction. When the Divine Predecessors bring up the prophecy of Brunan G defeating him, his Divine Shadow dismisses it, claiming that Brunan G are extinct. He then forcefully invites the advisors to join him in destroying all the planets, and sends them to the Lex. On their way to the starship, the Divine Predecessors argue about the prophecy's legitimacy. One of the extracted brains speaks up, informing everyone about piercing through the last Brunan G's chest and preserving him. He invites them to look into Kai's memories, where they see the Brunan G warrior visiting the Time Prophet, who foresees that his Divine Shadow will eventually fall at the hands of the Brunan G. Meanwhile, in the cluster, a line of prisoners who are hung and restrained moves through the gate. Suddenly, one of them recognizes Stan, triggering the other prisoners to denounce Stan as a traitor. However, a bolt comes loose, causing the shouting prisoner to fall to his demise. Subsequently, a holographic judge emerges to render judgment on the prisoners. As part of the process, a machine scans the prisoner's memories to determine guilt or innocence. The first prisoner to receive his verdict is Argon Protopi, a pie maker. He's found guilty of failing to pay a debt owed to the temple. As a result, he's sentenced to termination, with his vital organs to be donated to the protein bank. The next prisoner in line, Zev, is also found guilty of failing to fulfill her wifely duties and humiliating her young husband at the temple. As a consequence, she's sentenced to become a love slave or a cluster courtesan. At the Cobalt Stadium, Thodin of Astral B pair stands trial and is found guilty of heresy for inciting people to question his divine shadow. As his punishment, he's to be devoured by cluster lizards, formidable worms with segmented mouths, in front of a packed audience in the Colosseum. However, in a desperate attempt to evade his fate, Thodin releases a bug bomb from his nose to mess with the cluster's circuitry. Meanwhile, Stan approaches the Correction Center Level 2 guard, disguising himself to secretly inquire about his fate. To his dismay, he learns that due to accumulating numerous demerits and receiving a special notation, he's obliged to donate 3 organs, typically the eyeball, kidney, and privates. Failure to comply with this requirement will result in automatic termination. With this in mind, he immediately returns to the Correction Center, managing to temporarily knock out Thodin's bug bomb by swatting it. However, upon reaching the center, he realizes that it's too late, as he's been declared a fugitive and wanted for immediate termination. Meanwhile, the fallen bug bomb reactivates and makes several attempts to initiate a detonation sequence. However, it malfunctions repeatedly, leaving Thodin restrained in his cage. As a holographic judge enumerates his offenses, Thodin defiantly shouts at the audience, denouncing them as slaves. Suddenly, the malfunctioning bug bomb detonates, causing damage to the cluster's circuitry and resulting in the holographic judge's glitching. In the chaos, the cluster lizards intended for Thodin's execution are also released, mindlessly devouring everyone, including the youthful representatives from 20,000 planets and the robotic guards. Seizing the opportunity, Thodin makes his way out of the Cobalt Stadium and breaks free from his cage, subsequently releasing the other heretics, including Jigurata, despite his comrades' objections. Thodin hands Jigurata a prying bar and asks her to free the remaining heretics, but she refuses and instead jumps down into the protein collection tunnel, leaving Thodin and the others. Meanwhile, Zev is restrained on a table with her eyes covered, set to undergo her conversion into a love slave. However, during the process, a cluster lizard enters the room and devours Operator 790. As the creature moves in to devour Zev, the machine suddenly closes, accidentally cutting the cluster lizard. Zev then undergoes a dramatic change into an attractive lady. Unbeknownst to her, she also ended up with cluster lizard DNA in her body. Zev immediately breaks free from the table and quickly realizes the threat of the mind scanner that could mentally turn her into a love slave. Quick on her feet, she grabs 790's robotic head and places it on the scanner, reprogramming him as a love slave. As 790 awakens, he confesses his eternal love to Zev, who just chuckles and kicks him before leaving the area. Then, Zev spots Stan, whom she immediately recognizes from the holographic wanted poster. As 2 security drones identify her, they demand her surrender, leaving her to join Stan in fleeing the cluster. Upon reaching a locked door, Zev catches a glimpse of her own reflection and is mesmerized by her beauty. Just as the drones open fire and break the door, Zev and Stan manage to escape. As Zev and Stan approach yet another exit, 790 suddenly appears on a scooter board, prompting Zev to use him to unlock the door. When it opens, they come face to face with 2 cluster lizards. Suddenly, Zev unleashes a piercing shriek that directs the creatures to devour the drones instead, leaving Stan bewildered by her ability. Meanwhile, Thodin and the other heretics come across 2 security drones guarding the door, but to their surprise, the drones hail Thodin for winning his Shadow's Award of Merit. To ensure they pose no threat, Thodin takes their weapons and they don't react aggressively. As the heretics head to the Lex, his divine shadow assembles his officers and openly declares himself as a skeptic of prophecies. He then commands the Major to terminate the life of her comrade, and subsequently her own. Then, his divine shadow awakens Kai from cryosleep, aiming to demonstrate to the divine predecessors that he controls his own fate. Upon opening his eyes, Kai promptly inquires whose life he's meant to end. Meanwhile, Zev and Stan continue searching for an exit and board an elevator. However, the automated voice system identifies them as unauthorized passengers and warns of their disposal to the protein bank. As the elevator doors open, the duo is surprised to see Thodin, who immediately recognizes Stan but pushes him away as an arch-traitor. When Zev introduces herself to Thodin, he's captivated by her beauty. They continue to move forward, finally arriving outside the Lex, the most powerful powerful and destructive force ever created. When Stan interrupts Thodin from entering the Lex, the heretic shouts at the arch-traitor, reminding him that millions have sacrificed their lives so that he could have the key to the Lex. Suddenly, Kai beheads one of the heretics, leaving Thodin no choice but to pass the Lex key to his comrade. Thodin then urges the others to enter the Lex without him and kisses Zev, stating that she deserves to live because of her beauty. As Thodin confronts Kai, he recognizes him from Brunnen G, but Kai, now a murderous man, has no recollection of his past. The battle ensues, with Thodin gouging out his own eye and throwing it to the ground, rendering him invisible. The heretic then gains the advantage to sever Kai's arm. Meanwhile, a cluster lizard suddenly devours Thodin's comrade, prompting him to pass the key on to Stan. As Zev shrieks at the lizard, it goes after Stan, who rushes to go on the Moth, an insect-shaped ship. As Zev attempts to enter the vehicle, Jigaretta pushes her out and takes control of the Moth with Stan. Zev manages to hold on to the Moth's wing and lands on the Lexus bridge with them. Upon their arrival, Zev engages in a brief confrontation with Jigaretta, who ultimately lets her go. Since Stan possesses the key, Zev orders him to take control of the Lex. When the automated voice asks which planet to destroy, both Zev and Stan suggest the cluster. When the system states that it isn't permitted to destroy the cluster, Stan asks it to take them to the frontier. Revealing itself in the shape of a gargantuan wingless dragonfly, the Lex heads out into space. Despite Thodin managing to slice Kai's head, the resurrected assassin gains the upper hand and ultimately ends Thodin's life by piercing through his chest with his grappling weapon. After ending Thodin, Kai reattaches his own head and proceeds to enter the Lex. As a result of his failure to maintain order, his divine shadow apologizes to the predecessors and sacrifices himself. Then, his brain is replaced by a new one, as the claw takes it from his current body. While traveling through space, Stan is amazed at how the Lex is built, made possible by the amino acids in his tooth. Both Zev and Jigaretta are shocked that they're with the famous arch-traitor, prompting 790 to reveal that Stan was a past data cooperator who provided the forces of his shadow with the amino acid codes used to destroy 100 reformed planets, explaining why the heretics despise him. Upon their arrival at the frontier station, a general appears on the screen, demanding an exit code and threatening their starship with destruction if it isn't provided. Following Zev's suggestion, Stan orders the Lex to destroy the demanding general's planet, which it obliges. While in the midst of celebrating, Stan makes a romantic advance towards Zev. However, the woman is taken over by her lizard DNA and tries to devour him, triggering a similar response from the cannibalistic Jigaretta. To stop them, Stan backs off and reminds them that he possesses the Lex key. Upon encountering the Mega Shadow, the personal flagship of his divine shadow, Stan orders Lex to destroy it. However, the starship refuses because it's programmed not to attack any of his divine shadow's vessels. Suddenly, Kai emerges and forcefully hurls Jigaretta into the depths of the Lex. A nervous Stan kneels and claims to worship his divine shadow, but Zev interrupts, reminding him to maintain his dignity. Together, they attempt to negotiate for their freedom in exchange for the Lex, but Kai remains firm in ending their lives. Just when he's about to finish them, Kai hears the cries of the divine predecessors, prompting him to ride a Moth to their location. Meanwhile, his divine shadow, who now has a new brain, demands the Lex to be destroyed, stating that his priority is to stop the prophecy. He also wants the last Brunnen G eliminated. Kai arrives just in time to rescue the divine predecessors from a cluster lizard. When he touches a piece of brain, he suddenly hears the Brunnen G fight song, Yo Way Yo, and remembers his true identity. When the brain tells him that he has no willpower, Kai retrieves all the memories from the organ while squeezing it, and turns his back on his divine shadow's orders. On the bridge, Zev inquires with Stan about their next possible destination. Stan discloses that he has the coordinates stored in his tooth, revealing a location that his divine shadow can't reach. To extract the tooth, Zev punches Stan and asks help from 790 to read the coordinates. Once they obtain the information, Zev instructs Stan to command the Lex toward the destination. Suddenly, Kai returns, informing Zev and Stan what his divine shadow made him do. When his divine shadow appears, he orders Kai to end the disloyal duo, but the warrior ends up destroying the divine predecessors. As his divine shadow attacks Kai with his ephemeral waves, Zev and Stan help him by crushing the other divine predecessors, giving the warrior the opportunity to finally slice his divine shadow's head using his grappling weapon. As the Lex passes through the wormhole, or the fractal core, his divine shadow's essence leaves Kai and the starship. When they're at the bridge, the Mega Shadow attacks them, revealing that it was able to pass the fractal core too. However, since the Lex's memory has been erased after entering the wormhole, it's forgotten about its loyalty to his divine shadow, allowing Stan to order it to destroy the flagship. When Zev wants to return to the cluster to destroy it, 790 doesn't recognize it, revealing that the fractal core wiped out some of his memories too. As Zev and Stan grow confused, Kai reveals that they're in the Dark Zone, which Stan calls a place full of depravity and evilness. Before leaving, Kai advises them to find a new home, since there are some good planets in the zone. As he rests in his cryo chamber, Kai reveals that his proto-blood won't sustain him any longer, so the duo should think wisely when they decide to reanimate him. Subsequently, Stan takes charge and directs the starship to search for a new home. Unbeknownst to them, his divine shadow successfully returns to the cluster, vowing to seek vengeance for the fallen divine predecessors.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this, turn on notifications and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.